Welcome back. Yeah, where's the guitar, man? I know Jake has a guitar behind him.
I know. See, if you do that every time, it gets a little cheesy. So I like to keep the viewers guessing, Tom.
I asked Alla to play some Beach Boys in honor of Brian Wilson, but didn't quite happen. So
we're going to try to get some good vibrations going on today's show.
That's right. All right. Well, welcome back. Episode number 141 of the number one podcast in the social selling and modern selling category. As of 2 weeks ago, Carson, I think
and then Brandon has skipped I guess he just figured, we get number one,
right. We get to the top.
Chase,
Right. He has to go chase. So yeah, Brandon. Well, he's doing a class that's been going for a few weeks on Wednesdays. I think he has one more week. So I think there's this week and next week. And
he's going to come back even smarter, Tom.
I'm
excited.
Right. So we'll kick it up another level. But hey, we've got now. I'm here surrounded by two Microsoft. Amazing executives within Microsoft, Carson, as we know, and Jake Mannino. Jake, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Good to have you.
Hey, we're going to get in today to talking a little bit about, we've talked a lot about trust and building trust, but I don't know that we've really talked a lot about what that means, how you do it. What are some strategies for that? I'm very interested in, that's a good question, Bob. There's a guy, he's been a guest off and on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know who he is or if he's coming back. So
I think he'll still appeared in more episodes than I have, but it's getting close, man. I'm about to surpass Brandon's record. He better get his stuff together.
He might be on a movie set. He might be BSing us on a movie set somewhere.
I keep hearing these rumblings of them trying to bring Back to the Future. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Jake, you have to put up with our crap, but
it's all right.
Anyway,
man.
It's bad humor is part of what got us that number one ranking. So we have to give the people what they want.
I'm a big fan. Long-time listener, first-time caller, guys. All right.
We love having you.
So, hey, before we jump in, I want to thank again Brandon's company, Fist Bump, for all their work to sponsor and produce all of this and put it together. Fistbumps. It's coming up right here. Getfistbumps.com. Check them out if you are thinking about any sort of modern selling strategy with LinkedIn, live shows, podcasts, whatever. They are the team to do it. So thank you for Fist Bump as always. All right, Jake. So you're also I asked Carson before you came on, I said, do you and Jake know each other? He said, no, there's only 220,000 people at Microsoft. So we're not crossing paths every day. But Jake, tell us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft and your role, and then we'll kind of jump into this whole thing about trust.
Yeah, no, I love it. And thank you. Thanks, everybody. I mean, really, to sum it up, if you just imagined a world, right, where 8 billion people on the planet, everybody wakes up every morning and they're feeling empowered and inspired and excited to start their day, right? Because they know that every thought that they have, every word that they speak, and every action that they take throughout that day just aligns perfectly to their life purpose and their mission. And every night when they go to bed, they're just overwhelmed with gratitude, right? And excitement and sense of accomplishment. So excited to fall asleep so they can wake up the next day and do it again, right? So that's what I do. I've spent the last 25 years of my life as a social scientist, not just as a student, but a practitioner, right? Obsessed with leadership, with motivation, with teamwork. And I've done that through leading high-performing teams, obsessed with the behaviors of the inner workings really of a team and what that means. And done that through becoming a certified ICF executive coach. Or Carson, we were speaking earlier about the Guinness Book of World Records that we now have at Microsoft for the most people coached. And I'm encouraging other organizations to also to launch their internal coaching program. Coaching is not giving advice, not telling people what to do. It's about unlocking the true potential and empowering people to take ownership and to lead and to unlock their superpower. So in essence, that's what I do. In my day job, though, I run high-performing sales teams in strategics for some of the largest companies in the world. And being from Detroit, focused heavily in automotive, mobility, and manufacturing. So great to be here. Really excited.
So Jake, do you have two roles? Do you actually run a team and do coaching, or are you 100% coaching with those areas?
Well, yes, it kind of intertwines, right? So
Okay.
I'm a
we wear lots of hats here.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's multiple. Global sales director, so running a sales team, right, which is my passion, my focus of delivering high performance productivity results, pipeline revenue generation. That's what is really exciting for me. At the same time, though, I became hyper focused on how to drive improvement, and I've through reading all the books, I think we've all read the books and seen all the stuff out there, and getting an MBA and studying behavior and strategy to understand what it is to really unlock true potential. And I know that one of the topics today is trust. And I would argue that there's more than trust, that trust is earned through consistent, activities and connections. And I think Frances Frey, she's done some work, I think, here at Microsoft, right? Harvard professor, talks about trust and how we build that. And humans, we're just social animals, right? So we connect. It's the binding agent that we all rely on. So look forward to jumping into that topic as well. But as a tribe, as a group of people, how do we trust each other? And what does that mean?
Yeah, so let's start there. I mean, I assume whether you're managing or you're coaching, right, you're kind of maybe starting with that beachhead of trust. What does that really mean and how does that really relate to a sales strategy? It's real. You hear the word a lot. Oh, they have to trust
Yeah.
you. No,
Yeah.
like trust, right? You hear that a lot, but what does that really mean? And how does that factor into your sales strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. And trust, and I love the like trust strategy, because a customer won't usually buy from you unless they know you. It's hard to sell to somebody that you don't know and they don't know you. And we have some characteristics around what does that mean to know somebody, to truly know somebody. And what does it mean to truly like somebody? Because if you're not likable, it's kind of hard to get along with people you don't like. Let's be honest, we're all human. So if you don't know anybody and you don't trust anybody, you don't like them, that's very difficult to trust. And trust is this binding agent that is earned, right? It's earned through interactions. It's earned through being consistent. It's earned through active listening. And in the world of coaching, active listening, insightful listening, active inquiry. And really, I think what it comes down to is we reflect onto ourselves, and it's trusting ourselves. And if you can trust yourself, then other people can sense that. And that trust then spreads. And again, as humans, we make mistakes. Trust is earned, it's broken, it's repaired, it's rebuilt, right? And it gets stronger over time. But you have to trust yourself first. And I think that Frances talks about this great triangle where most people wobble between the three characteristics of what, when put together, formulate what trust really is. Authenticity, which we can talk about. And I think Seth Godin has a great perspective on authenticity versus being authentic versus being consistent, what that means. He talks about, would you want an authentic surgeon or would you want a consistent surgeon, right? What does that mean? So we want somebody who's really consistent, how they show up. But that's the top of the triangle. And then you have logic. You have to have somebody that's at least competent. We often talk about coherence. I talk a lot about coherence, fluency, and groundedness, but you have to be competent. And then the third aspect is empathy. And that's another one that gets thrown around a lot. We could dive into as well. So authenticity, logic, and empathy together, if demonstrated properly, will help you earn trust. But trust is nothing that is just manufactured as a tactic. It's something that is earned over time. It's not trust is not a short-term play to get a deal done. That's not how it works.
Yeah, Jake, amazing stuff. And I would say far too often, many sellers you throw these around as buzzwords, and much of what you said, while in my mind should be commonplace and common knowledge, it's not. Why do you think so many sellers today either pay lip service to some of those things or really just don't know how to go about developing trust and earning that right to be a trusted advisor?
Yeah. So I have a lot of people that come to me, that contact me quite a bit, that want to get into sales. Calls daily, people constantly coming in. And one of the first questions we ask is why? What's the why? And Simon Sinek, others, the why, everybody talks about it. But what is the why? What's your purpose? Why do you want sales? And a lot of times people will go right to abundance. They'll go right to, man, because you guys make a lot of money. It seems so much fun because I want to buy the new car, the new house, the new whatever. And then they wrap themselves into what we call agency power. And agency power is really false at the end of the day. They're not going to be very good sellers because they're not centered and they're grounded in their own self-power. And if they are, and they find that the abundance that they want is unlocked internally through gratitude, then you have a good seller, right? Because they're centered, they're grounded. So trust and gratitude has to come from yourself. And we find a lot of people anchored in materialistic things that aren't true, and they come off fake. And that's why authenticity is so important in my world, at least, to be authentic, of knowing who you are. And it's an exercise we do in coaching a lot, where it's not about the other person and the dialogue that's going on. It's about the dialogue that's going on inside of your mind. Right. So how do we slow down that internal chatter so we can be present? And the more present you are with people, the more they will trust you because you're listening.
How do you move somebody though from, look, I would assume that a lot of the salespeople that you're bringing on have that abundance philosophy, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to hit my quota or double my quota or make my numbers or whatever. How do you get them to move from that philosophy to more of that, what you just described, of, hey, building that trust and trust in myself? And I mean, that seems like a big shift for the typical DNA of a good salesperson.
Yeah, not everybody's built to be a good seller, right? There are some people that they want to go to marketing, advertising, management, whatever it is. I would argue that we all sell every day. Every second we get up, we are negotiating somewhere. And if you picture this, just imagine you're standing on the edge of Antarctica, right? And you're looking out into an abyss of cold, of ice, of just frozen uncertainty, right? And you just recruited 27 people, 27 men to go on an expedition with you to find a passage through Antarctica, only to find out that your ship not only gets stuck on the ice, but sinks to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, right? So there you are with 27 men that you've recruited to go on this expedition, and your boat sinks. And you live now, you're in survival mode, right? And you are in survival for not 2 hours, not 2 days, not 2 weeks, but for 2 years, living on floating chunks of ice, right? With 27 men, only to then go out and recruit people to come and save you, right? And that's the story of Ernest Shackleton. If anybody's heard of that, 1914, for 2 years. And when you talk about trust, the men, and he saved every single person, right? It took 2 years. And he took a small lifeboat, went 800 miles across the Arctic Ocean. And think about this, in 1914, the compass and guiding and all this stuff, and hiked mountains to recruit a team to go out and rescue. The level of trust that team had in him was unshakable. And I would argue that we don't see that very often in today's world in 2025. So how did he do it? That level of trust was developed, and I've done studies. We have a lot of research on this. I have a great white paper I could share with you. There are 3 things, and this is the secret. I'll give it to you. there are three things that we found if it occurs in a team by the leader, you have high levels of trust. And high levels of trust relate to better performance, better pipeline hygiene, better just overall well-being, and better just excitement to show up every day. And the three things are, and it's proven that we can improve a team's performance by at least 19%. I'd say 20%, but 19 is the number, right? So if you do 100 million a year in revenue and you want to do 119, right? Follow these three things. Number
Round
one,
numbers sound less believable anyway, Jake. So I'm glad you.
yeah, I don't. My first time on the show, guys. I don't want to over
I
embellish.
really trusted that number when he said it. If he would have said 20, I would have never
19%.
trusted it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what they are. And they seem so obvious, but a lot of people miss this, especially sales leaders and leaders that are leading big teams. And there's a difference between managing and leading, right? To be a leader, you got to volunteer. Say, hey, this is something I'm going to do. I have a vision. I have a philosophy. Number one, rapport. And we're talking about rapport. And if you look at Shackleton, he had rapport with his 27 men that was so amazing. Like rapport outside of work. Rapport, think about the leaders. If there's anybody listening, if you are leading a team, ask yourself, what level of rapport do I have with my team? Do I really know them as individuals outside of work? How much time do I spend building a rapport? And if you think about all the amazing people that you've ever worked for, what level of rapport did you have with that person? Generally, it's pretty high. And then if you think of all the terrible people you work for, you really don't have very good rapport with them. So think about that. So how do we develop rapport, deep rapport with our team? And that will equate to better relationship. Second is straight up adaptability. A lot of times leaders won't adapt. We'll say managers too, won't adapt to the style of their team. And that results in a lot of discomfort, a lot of friction. And if you're not able to adapt to people, then you're just dictating, you're giving advice, you're telling people what to do, and it doesn't build trust. And then the third component is this straight up involvement. And think about this. Think about, and Carson, you're a salesperson, right? How many times would you take your manager or your boss out to a sales call with you, right? Because you knew he or she was dynamic, they were amazing. You wanted that person involved in what you do, right? That involvement is there. And think about the opposite. How many times you maybe had a poor manager or leader, like, whatever you do, don't get that person involved, right? Sure. So rapport, adaptability, and involvement, if we move that barometer up in those three categories, your team will improve by 19%.
It's interesting what Bob, I think this aligns to what you see a lot, right, in maybe military teams or whatever. He said they had 23 people. They were in naval aviation. They had to understand their roles and to basically function as a team. Trust and rapport were keeping those critical. And maybe the sales team situation isn't quite as mission critical as flying helicopters, but you still have the same objective, right? Which is to build that bond of what I'm hearing you saying, that bond where everybody kind of feels comfortable and trusting of each other, not just of themselves.
Sure. Yeah. Whether you're stuck on a, piece of ice floating in the Arctic Ocean, or you're, in the military, or you're running a sales team, it's still rapport. And you have to have that. And maybe it's also in your social connections as well. Think about your friends, your family, and your social network. The deeper relationships that we have, the deeper level of rapport that we have with people.
What I think is often very tragic is that, speaking as someone who's had several leaders over the years, and also somebody who's had a lot of direct reports over the years, these fundamentals aren't as commonplace as they should be. And, when we talk about mastering modern selling as an example, and the tectonic plates that are shifting right now before our very eyes with technology, with AI, you have to have this foundation in place in order to really sustain that change and be successful. Otherwise, people will go back to what I like to call comfortable ways of mediocrity or failing, or they'll lead through fear. it takes a lot of confidence and resilience to lead in an era like this. At Microsoft, we have a leadership philosophy called model, coach, care, which really means we as leaders have to lead the charge, be willing to jump into the fray and into the field. And, I like to spend as much time with customers as humanly possible. Even being in a leadership role, which can be challenging, but it's the most important thing next to being with my people and being with my team as much as humanly possible. Jake, you hit on something really important there, and it's uncovering the why of the people that we support and serve. And I have kind of a philosophy that I leverage where I just call it, the investments and the relationships you have within your sphere. Now, these are all the people that you serve. And in our world, that could be our customers, that's our direct reports, that's our leadership, that's our robust partner ecosystem. But all the people that we support and serve, we have to make constant investments into those relationships. And if we find the right way to do that, that makes all the difference in the world. Now, the beauty is nowadays, with everything that we're seeing from a modern selling perspective, some of us can help us sound more effective, research better, quicker, whatever it is. But at the same token, we still can't compromise or sacrifice these fundamental components. In fact, I would argue that they are more important now than ever because they can be so easily lost amidst all of the noise of the technology. What are your thoughts, Jake? You've been doing this a long time. How are you ensuring that you and your team are still staying at the forefront of those three core priorities?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll go back to just being authentic. You have to kind of be real. You got to be yourself, and you have to be vulnerable in that you're not afraid. Right. I think fear is what holds a lot of us back. And if your failure protects the ego of others, right? Think about that. Then we need to recognize that. We need to be aware, right? And it's okay and I wouldn't be here unless I made so many mistakes, right, along the way. And every day I still do, because I know if I'm not messing something up somehow, I'm not growing, right?
Yeah.
So with the team, it's about first of all, the rapport piece of it, the deep understanding of connecting with people, understanding. And I was trained this early on. I'm from Detroit. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was a junior rep, I worked for Pete Carmanos, who was the CEO of CompuWare. And there were some great lessons I learned from him. And one of which was around really understanding your client. And he would come in and quiz us if we really knew our client, if we really had rapport. Do we know the things that they like? Do we know what they like to do? And not just for relationship's sake, but to really know and understand and care about your client in a meaningful way. And so taking that just not to the customer, but also your employees and the people you work with, your family and your coworkers and everybody, to have that level of empathy at least being really sincere, I think, and being truthful and honest, and also moving forward a little bit, having this vision, right? So the lost leader, if Shackleton didn't have a vision, he wouldn't have survived, right? So the vision is so important. And I often talk about the exercise of the mirror or the window. And a lot of times we look in a mirror, and what we see is everything that was behind us. We see it the past. And that's cool. But that's not where I want to live, right? I want to live looking out the window. And in the window, I see the meadow, I see the trees, the forest, the desert, the sun, the mountains, whatever that is. I see a future. And I see something that is greater than what I was yesterday. And bringing that level of vision, enthusiasm, and excitement resonates with others. There's a possibility. I have a philosophy. My team would tell you if they're listening, Jake's a red path, green path person. So I was certified as an EQ assessor. So I try to observe language and tone and inflection and context and clusters. And one of the things that perks my ear up every time I hear the word can't, right? So if you think about the word can't itself, it's actually a contraction of the auxiliary verb can combined with a negative particle not. And when you put that together, it actually stimulates neurological reaction in your brain that says, this is impossible. I'm going to quit. I can't do this. Right. So that's red path. So how do we take people that are red path and convert into green path to believe? And that belief is looking out the window. And if we think back, even as a child, for example, my dad, when I grew up, used to do magic shows, right? He used to build this makeshift like stage, you know, in the living room, and all the kids would come in, man, it was great. And we'd eat popcorn. But man, he was just so great, right? He's cutting my sister in half, and you know, he's like pulling, you know, pigeons out of, you know, candles on fire, and, you know, all this stuff. And as a kid, you're just in awe and amazement. You're like, whoa, like, how did that happen? And as you get older, you learn it was a trick, right? But there's still that spark. Well, sorry, I didn't want to ruin it, guys. There's still that spark, though, that says, whoa, oh my gosh, what happened? There's that crack of light that comes through just for that moment that makes you believe that anything is possible. And that is the energy, that's the emotion, that's what we have to infuse back into our sales teams. I've had so many customers, so many deals, and I'm sure you guys have too, where they say it can't be done. We'll never do this. I'm like, cool, that's awesome. And I think back to magic. And even as an adult, knowing that's true, the reason why those magic shows were so good is preparation. You have to prepare. And if you're able to build a team with that level of charisma and excitement, then there's nothing that can't be done. And that's the level of vision and energy that should be brought into our teams.
That is exceptional, man. First off, Jake, listening to you makes me feel like I could run through a brick wall.
Why stop there? We got mountains too.
I think we're cut from the same cloth. But I guess that's part of my where I was grew up in a similar path too. I never learned it was a trick. I've always been like the Peter Pan who refuses to up. And I remember so many deals. One of my largest that I've talked about on this show, were literally a customer. The person who used to be their rep was like, "Oh yeah, they'll never sign with you. They're going to take you to the altar and dump you." Yeah. And I had so many people, and you can relate to this because we work in the same place. So many people that jumped in at various points in the sales cycle, only to eventually kind of drift away. This isn't really going to happen. I got to go focus on other stuff. But you better believe when that wind wire was about to go out, everybody swarmed back in because it wanted a piece of the pie. So it takes a lot of resilience to be able to drive through and drive that home. Great work.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'll one point on that. This is something I always share with my team. So again, you're on a big fishing boat, right? And you're out there and you're casted out there and you've been working all day, hustling. Finally, you get like this amazing thing on the line, right? And you're like, oh, and you try to reel it in, and it's going. And next thing you know, everybody shows up, and we got a net, we got this, and we got, all people have never even helped you bait the hook, right? And so they want to help, and then all of a sudden you get it up there and it slips off the line, and then they blame you for losing it.
That's it,
right? Right. We know that story, man. Right.
I can relate to it.
Yeah. Hey, so Jake, I'm really intrigued about the way you're kind of looking at this, like building outside or inside out. If you build that trust with your team and you build that philosophy and approach, how does that then carry over to the relationship with the prospect and the customer? And do you see because I believe in this day and age, you hear a lot of people talking about creating demand, right? Creating demand. I believe in this day and age, it's almost impossible in B2B sales. It's impossible to create demand without having the foundation of trust, right? You're kind of yelling into the abyss if you're trying to create demand without some level of trust. So how does that all translate what you just talked about? You got this kick-ass, really aligned team. How does that then carry over to the prospect and the customer? And what kind of results do you see? And where does it kind of grease the skids and provide that tailwind for creating demand?
Yeah, I love this question because, we used to we've all been cold callers, right? And cold callers before, this whole fancy internet and all these fancy phones and everything we got here and all this stuff, it was just smiling and dialing, right? And I was like, hey, if I can do 100 calls a day, that's 500 calls a week, and I get 2 appointments, and I can close one deal, then I'm winning, right? And then it was the Kevin and Seven, 7 degrees, like who knows who, network effect, right? And how do we do that? And I would like to mention one thing: the difference between B2B and B2C. The only real difference that I see is that B2B, they're not spending their own money. Like it's the company's money. B2C is like, hey, I got to really, I'm paying something here. Right. But so in the world of being a digital seller today versus what we used to be in the past is completely different. Right. And I shared an example of a damaging admission for, where I don't like buying cars. I really don't. It's a terrible experience for me. It's very stressful. I don't like it. But I had to buy a car just at the end of the year. And so I found, and luckily with car gurus and everything else, right, you're able to research. I knew the make, I knew the model, I knew what I want, and I always buy slightly used. And so I found two from two different dealerships. And I went into one dealership, and immediately that guy tried to sell me under urgency. He didn't understand anything about me. I walked in the door, and it was the typical, coffee breath and, kind of guy. And I'm not knocking used car sales. I think it's a great profession. Anybody wants to get into sales, there's two things I always recommend: become a waiter, a waitress, or a bartender, or, try to sell used cars if you can, because it is an art, right? And you learn a lot. So, and I think the waiter and waitress thing's even better because it's more teamwork, and there's a lot. I have a whole philosophy on that. But this first car dealership tried to sell me on urgency. Hey, guess what? That car is hot. It's going to go. Put a deposit down now because somebody's coming in an hour to buy it. It didn't work for me, right? I'm like, I'm good. And so I went to the second dealership. Second dealership started off by just, rapport. What are you looking for? This, that, the other, a little bit about what I was looking for, and started with the damaging admission. You know what? This car, it's an SUV. It's got huge tires. It's really loud going down the road. In fact, down the freeway, it's just noisy as all hell. But if you're looking for something that's going to get you through the Michigan winters and something you can take up north and it looks really cool in the summer, this is for you. And I'm like, bingo, done, right? So how does that translate then to selling to customers in today's world? We have a luxury at Microsoft because we're Microsoft, right? We can generally get a meeting with just about anybody because we're interesting, right? People want to talk to us, and we're in the middle of this huge transformation right now. There's a massive digital transformation occurring right now. And if you believe in the next 3 to 5 years, 55% of all the jobs that we know are either going to be repurposed or completely changed or possibly obsolete. So what I teach my teams now is to, when they get in front of their customers, is to talk about two things: patterns and systems. And this is what we try to teach, especially early in career, people that are coming in to understand their customer. Anybody can go out and read a customer's 10K. Anybody can use the fancy AI stuff to look everything up. But if you don't understand the pattern, right, and knowing that, when we talk about recognition, utilization, and creation, recognizing that patterns exist with your customer, right? Recognizing that there are patterns. So how do you, and it's like a musician, right? For example, when you study music, you study other people's music, right? You study the 12-bar blues, you study the scales, the modes, everything. You recognize the pattern. And then when you get good, then you start copying the patterns. You utilize. I was in a cover band for 15 years, right? Played all the songs, right? It was great. Awesome. Once you get that, if you want to move up, then you have to start creating patterns, right? So how do you create patterns with your customer? And then understanding the difference between patterns and systems, because there are systems that run your customer's environment. Some people call it the operating, the OS of the culture, the cultural OS of a customer. So the structured frameworks that are in place, right, that run a customer, right? Understand that culture, becoming part of that. So to immerse yourself into that system. And this is something like within the culture. What's a culture? It's symbols, logos, beliefs, rites of passage, rituals, all the things. So you have a customer that every Thursday they go out for happy hour and play darts, and then you get invited to do that. That's a no like trust. They must like you enough to invite you out to their private thing that they do. So training digital sellers in today's world, breaking into a customer is very challenging, right? Because you're bombarded. How many LinkedIn stuff do you get every day? People want to sell me a franchise. You want to buy a franchise? I got one for you, right? Or if you need an investor, you got it. What will never be lost is the human connection, the network effect. You have to do something so good and be so remarkable at it that somebody is going to tell somebody else. That is how you're going to win. And without that network effect, it's very difficult to earn anybody's trust, right? Unless you identify a group of people that want something and you just happen to show up, right? It's that whole being in a lot of places in a lot of time. People say you got to be, right place, right time. You got to be in a lot of places. So anyway, that kind of was my tangent on the systems, the patterns, and understanding how to really study your customer and be involved in their culture, as opposed to just rattling off, facts off a 10K or whatever that is.
Can you give an example of a pattern, like what that would be or what you would be potentially? I understand the systems, but the pattern part, what would you be looking for?
Sure. So there's patterns within companies down to simple patterns. We have a budget that is X. Our fiscal year is Y. We spend in these months. Or our pattern is we plan for next year's budget during these times. Understanding what those patterns are within the company, when their earnings are, and what influences decisions are really important, right? So patterns can be repeatable and they're predictable, right? Whereas systems are structures, they're frameworks. Think about the solar system, right? The solar system's in place, and we understand the system that binds it, right? The rules, which is gravity, right? We're smart enough now to at least figure that. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about it. So understanding what the buying patterns are of your customer and recognizing that, so that you can often be in the right planning. Remember, being prepared is half the battle. And this is about commitment, consistency, tenacity, and putting in the hard work. There's a lot of people that show up, they think they can sell something, and then they're going to move on. And those aren't the people I really want to invest in to become really powerful and meaningful and create change. And if you're able to create change and have a connection, be more of a connector. I was just coaching somebody who is a security specialist that's selling to chief security officers and CISOs, and he gets tripped up a lot because he's in these meetings and they're going way over his head, right? Because they're just advanced topics, or there's solutions and things they're talking about he doesn't know. And instead of him trying to become an expert, understand what their problem is and become a connector, right? Connect that person to somebody who's an expert. Pair him or her with another CISO of another company that solved the problem. So you don't have to be an expert all the time. You can be a connector. But understanding the patterns about how companies operate, crucially important to really becoming, and I love the quote, I don't love it, but I'll say it, the trusted advisor, right?
Well, I think that's in Carson, what Jake just said, right? We talk about research using AI for research. Think about building an AI tool or a prompt that says, don't just go look for information, but see if you can identify patterns and or systems through the research that you're doing on the account.
Bingo.
I mean, the AI may or may not provide some good insights on that, but
Well, it will. I've done it. I agree.
Okay.
I think what Jake is laying out is exceptionally powerful. You can't show up wanting to talk about your product or service. And so many of our customers we know, Tom, from the Jolt effect and from other sources, they're not married to status quo, but they're going down a path because they don't want to make the bad choice. They have that fear of messing up. And so I think what's critical, so many of us, we put the cart before the horse and we try to reach out saying, hey, this product is going to change the game for you and it's going to help boost your productivity and it's going to make you better. But the reality is the person doesn't know us from Adam. So why on earth would they risk their current path, which is comfortable, mediocre, but it's comfortable? Why would they risk the current path for somebody that they don't know? And that's what, unfortunately, there's not a lot of really great, effective sales cultures. I was on a panel this week with a bunch of leaders. It's on the road and presenting, and we were talking about technology and AI and how it's changing the game. And one of the things that we were talking about, I mean, so many leaders out there right now, they're throwing darts in the dark. They know that they need to do something
Yeah.
different to capitalize on this moment. But the problem is they don't know exactly where to go. Not a lot of people really do. I mean, it's almost like we're stockbrokers. You know, we're making educated guesses, but they need a guide, and they need a guide that they can trust. And so few sales coaches are actually training sellers on how to go out and earn the relationship. And the big aha moment that we had this week was, you know, if I think back to all the managers that I've had in my life,
Yeah.
Chat GPT or Microsoft Copilot would be a better sales manager than probably 60% of them, sadly, because you can ask it what you should do or say in many different circumstances. And so, Jake, what I would say when you're talking to even us training somebody to be better in their own role and to really own their role, I mean, I've leveraged AI in the moment talking to an executive because they said something that might have been a little bit over my head, but I've had it coach me on what I could say based on what the executive just said to me.
Yeah.
Now I've assimilated that into my arsenal. So I might have, you know, not handled this call exactly the way I would have wanted to, but I said something poignant that earned me a second date. But now, guess what? Every executive conversation that I have after the fact, I'm better as a result. We've got to stretch beyond our comfort zones now more than ever before. But it's got to be in a bid to connect. It's got to be to earn the relationship.
Yeah. 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 It's we are in a unique time right now, and it's, if you believe that AI is going to transform everything, which we are all saying it is, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety and uncertainty about that. But if we look at also the pattern, even in society and human culture, if we think 150 years ago in America, 80% of the people here were farmers. Fast forward 2025, less than 3% of the people are farmers, yet we produce enough food if we wanted to feed the entire planet. So due to technology and innovation, we have disrupted that in a crazy way in that time period. And things are accelerating so fast that if you believe that, and I was at a keynote speaker once with Mark Fields, he was the CEO of Ford, and he stated by 2020, all the cars they were going to produce had no steering wheel or gas pedal or brake, and they're full autonomous. Now, there's like 8 million Uber drivers and taxi drivers. So you would have been freaking out saying, oh my God, I'm going to get, like I'm out of a job. So you would have spent the last 10 years, 8 years stressed out, worried that you're going to be out of a job. Right. But 2025, I just took an Uber 2 days ago. It worked great. Right. So you could spend, and Mark Twain was famous for saying this, you could spend half of your life worrying about something that never happened. So you have to decide. And I think this is an awakening for all of us to get deeper into who we are, ourselves, understand our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, our imagination, SIFT, I call it SIFT, sensation, imagery, imagination, feelings, and thoughts, to get closer to who we are so we can help empower others. Our real job here is to serve. And if we get back to that level of gratitude and find that abundance within ourselves, it doesn't matter what technology comes, what changes happen, because we know we're doing what is true to our purpose and we're helping others. And so if we help others get back to that, then we'll become more grounded. And as I said before, coherence, fluency, and groundedness, and everything else will happen, right? Everything else will occur how it should. And for me, I'm still very optimistic about what the future is. And one of the challenges that I also have around AI is retention and application, because I can go to AI right now and come up with a really badass answer to a very complicated question, but ask me about it tomorrow, I'll be like, I have no idea what that was. So all the blog writers out there, all the people that are doing all this stuff with AI, and quiz them on it, and they don't know what they're, because they don't have the knowledge, and they're not retaining the knowledge inside of themselves to actually build on it to give to somebody else. It's just a lot of information, which is cool. It sounds really cool, right? But are we retaining it? Are we applying it? And I think that if you were to take a chemical engineer who could use AI to develop an amazing, solution to a problem, or a new compound or new chemical. And I believe AI is doing incredible stuff in bio and tech and nanotech and quantum and science and medicine. It's incredible. So the chemical engineer can do that. And that's like awesome. Now go to a whiskey distiller, right? And yeah, maybe AI can help him or her develop a new type of whiskey. But if it's not going to be acceptable to the human palate, then I don't think I'm going to get that, right? Like, so we still, that's the sensations. It's the five senses: taste, touch, that element of AI, at least I don't see replacing anything.
And it's a constant pivot, Jake. I mean, in the course of this conversation, I mean, you harked me back to my own smile and dial days, calling off of Excel spreadsheets and making check boxes of every time I dialed a physical phone, all the way to where we are today. And I've survived through the whole thing, thrived through the whole thing, because I've been open and eager and willing to adapt and evolve and pivot. Sometimes I had no choice. And some of the conversations that I have today with sellers globally is be invaluable and keep that bid to connect and that earning the relationship at the heart of everything that you're doing. We spend so much time worrying about things that don't even come to fruition. I'm not worried about my job going away. In fact, what has been my claim to fame at Microsoft over 11 years is I created a demand generation Moneyball engine that has helped me get into lines of business across hundreds of customers and generate over $1 billion in revenue that I've presented to Satya and the other senior leadership team. But I had a call literally today where they are going to take it, create AI prompts around it and workflows, and automate it. It's going to free up a ton of my time. It's going to be able to globalize it. It kind of makes what I've been doing obsolete. That's great. On to the next. I'll have a lot more time to spend with my team and my customers and coaching. So I think you've got to embrace what's on the other side. What does the tech and the AI do to help you create a relationship like never before? I think what's great, how I'm standing apart from all the noise right now, is playing with the prompts to write a email subject line that maximizes open rate. And I'll write the email myself, or I'll have the AI help me with one or two additional bullet points that might really help me stick the landing. Or, right before walking into a meeting, doing some of the research. And, while I'm not going to read the paragraphs that come out, I may get one sentence out of that that really helps me delivering. And again, to your point, we've got to keep assimilating that knowledge into our arsenal. Bob is our most valuable commenter on this show, and he has this phrase that he talks about a lot of times where the AI and the tech can prevent us from developing that alligator skin that we need in order to be effective, to go out and create relationships, to earn our stripes, and to really be able to do the things that we need to be able to do to be successful sellers.
You know what the definition of worry is? Putting undue attention on a problem that does not yet exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what you were just talking about, right? We put all this attention on something that the problem has not really existed. And when
my mantra, Tom, is Hakuna Matata, which means no worries. So
okay, yeah, exactly.
And it's tough to get around. Yeah. We're human. So that's part of that's our, survival mode. And being aware, I think just being aware is a important step for everybody, just to be present and aware. To say I'm not going to be worried, well, that's, if you have people that have kids, for people that have parents, grandparents, it's very difficult, right? But just saying I'm going to be worried, I'm human, it's okay, but I'm going to let it go, right? And I'm aware of it. And I think it's awareness. That is very important, and it's something that AI will probably never replace. But to your point, Carson, if you what the work that you do, your craft, and I can tell by the excitement and the energy and the love that you have for it, that's where it's at, right? That's where it's at, and that's where a lot of sellers fail because they're not leading from the heart. They're leading from a different place that becomes, not authentic, not good, not
And all
real.
that stuff comes like if you do it the right way for the right reasons and you become a student of what works and you're not like overly rigid in process, like you got to be able to bend and flow to where the puck is going. You'll get all the things. Like
Sure.
I'm so grateful to sales because I've got great relationships from it and I've done everything I've set out to do, but it wasn't about chasing the money or the recognition or the prize. It was about obsessing over relationships and executing process. And that's what led to success.
So, so as we kind of wrap up here, final
Yeah.
question or topic for you, Jake. When we talk a lot about this,
Mhm.
right? A lot of sales leadership or sales management or even organizations, it's very, quota driven, numbers
Sure.
driven, target driven. How many calls did you make?
Yep.
How do you deal with maybe not just sales leaders, but maybe their executives, CEOs or COOs or people that have that mentality? Wait a minute, how many calls did they do today? Or how do you get them to buy in and embrace the strategy of trust first, basically, and the
Mhm.
trust factor as we're talking about? And I assume there's some that just can't, right, and won't.
Yeah.
But how do you take that up the line to and permeate that beyond just the sales team and the organization?
Yeah. Trust is a story. And I think that everything that we tell in some degree is a story. And we'll believe, humans are great at believing things, whether it's sleight of hand, magic trick, or smoke and mirrors. And that's not really what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about a story and instilling confidence. And there's the way to do that is through proof. You have to have proof that you are moving forward, that you are exceeding expectations, that you are doing activities that are creating impact, right? In our impact circles here, right? In the things that we do. And I'm hyper focused on this story that we tell that's part of that vision that I talked earlier to instill hope and excitement for what's coming in the future. And having some proof that, yes, we got these deals done. Yes, we executed. Yes, we failed here. Yes, and anytime a customer says no, it's just no, not yet. It's always not yet. And in the world of improvisation, which is, I believe, really important to teach people in sales, is the art of improvisation, the art of being able to say yes and with somebody, the art of being able to interact with people and have sense of flow, and the art of being able to find opportunity and hope in tragedy when others find that despair, right? And that's the red path, green path. So to answer your question, it's about keeping green path. It's about telling a story, instilling hope and confidence. And there's always somebody that will find something that if you take that out to everybody, then you create an energy of excitement, of enthusiasm, of optimism, right? And so that energy has to be there. It's when you say the word can't that you start to shut down. And really quick, I'll just share a brief story. So, anybody ever hear of James Osterberg? Okay, so James you've heard of him.
Yeah.
So he was in the late '60s. He was here in Ann Arbor, Detroit, Michigan. He went to a Doors concert, right? And so the story goes that Jim Morrison and the Doors were in town, and they were going to the concert, and the band wanted to stop and get some ice cream. And Jim didn't want to do that. So instead of ice cream, he drank large volumes of whiskey. And so when they got to the concert, it was terrible, right? Jim literally passed out on the stage. The band was just totally pissed off. Everybody's upset. The security was upset. The crowd started going nuts. The show was over, canceled, right? Had to leave. Everybody, and even the media, wrote up it was the worst thing ever, except for one person, right? James Osterberg. And he saw in that a moment of just a vision, like, oh my God, this is what I have to do. It was incredible. It was magnificent. It was life-changing for him. That's Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop became one of the most recognized. Iggy and the Stooges stormed the world with one of the best punk rock bands ever, right? So that one experience for that one person gave enthusiasm, hope, and a vision of something that could happen where everybody else saw failure. That's the emotion, that's the enthusiasm, that's the energy. So telling the story, convincing others, doing it, you got to have proof, you got to do it. Like Iggy was no slouch, right? He came onto the scene, he was, he played with the best. So you have to bring it, which means you have to have diligence around daily habits, and we don't have time to get into what daily habits can provide as you learn a craft and what it means to be a professional.
What I'm hearing you say is identify some things that you're doing that are maybe extraordinary or even unexpected, and make sure you publicize those to your bring that to your management, get them to go, wow, how did that happen? Or, oh, I thought that deal was dead. Or, we didn't think there was any chance of that happen, or whatever the case may be. And then I think, Carson, you're a great example of that in your early days of social selling, right? Of, you had a lot of naysayers of the whole LinkedIn thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tom, I mean, it's kind of like, to expound upon what Jake just said, I mean, you've got to resist the urge or temptation to just go with the grain every single time. I have so many situations where sometimes even my team wonders why, when I'm on an executive customer call and they ask a question that I think normally my team might have said no, or, we don't have a firm answer to that. Mine's always, hey, sounds like an interesting pursuit. Let's find a way. And these have led to some of the most fruitful relationships. You can't get hung up thinking about licensing or dollars or a deal. You've got to get hung up thinking about, what does this executive want their legacy to be? What problem are they trying to solve? How can I, with my unique resources, help them solve that problem? Because guess what? If you do that, you will earn their trust. They will commit to a path with you. And that's what's going to lead to the deals. I don't go into any of these thinking about deals. I go in thinking about, how can I earn a level of trust and communication with this executive? How can I understand what matters to them? And then just, again, not go with the grain, not just try to keep up with the Joneses. Don't just ask the layup, what keeps you up at night, and, the basic.
Snoring. I got a CPAP. It's snoring.
Right. I've got to, there you go. I've got to lean in, and I've really got to understand, why did this executive come to this organization? What is the stamp that they want to put? At the end of the day, we have to earn the right to influence. And we're not going to be able to do that without building that foundation of trust and transparency. But once you do that, the way that you can influence is a lot bigger than what you may be thinking. So I encourage people to look at, what is that unique value that you bring, your team brings, your organization brings. Sometimes we're not a fit, but very often we have great relationships that can be really tangibly meaningful to the organizations we serve. And if I can just connect a few dots, call in a few favors, it can be game-changingly meaningful for these organizations. And that wouldn't just be a straight line of trying to talk to a specific product or service. So aim higher.
Jake, you definitely brought some good vibrations to the show today. There's no doubt about that. So
I'm a big fan.
You. And I think, Carson, there's some material here that's going to kick us up even higher.
Absolutely.
One.
I mean, we gotta maintain our number one ranking. Jake, you definitely helped it. It was amazing. And it goes to show, again, you made the point at the beginning, Tom. I mean, there's 200,000 plus employees at this great organization, but it's I learned a ton just sitting in with Jake here over the last hour. I hope a lot of others did as well. And man, it really gives us a lot of food for thought, especially from somebody that's been doing this for a long period of time, but continues to adapt and evolve and pivot around some core fundamentals that really make you tick. So, Jake, very appreciative of you sharing today.
Thank you.
All right, Carson, any final thoughts? Want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I want to hit Bob's question. Do I think the exec has a strong distrust of me as soon as I walk through the door because I'm a salesman? No. And here's why, Bob. Because I don't show up like a salesman. Now, don't get me wrong, like, and I walk an interesting line as well because I've written books and I know my brand and things of that stature. So I know that there's customer executives out there that frankly may shy away from some of that. And that's not baggage that other sellers carry. So my baggage is unique to me. But on the same token, I turn that around because if I have a brand and a persona as a salesman, a good and effective salesman at that, then how can I leverage that persona to benefit my customer? I'm in a unique position to leverage that. In fact, I train sellers at customer organizations. I have brought relationships that I have to bear to bring fruit to those customer organizations. And I have a lot of interesting relationships and ideas that have helped customer organizations to enhance business development, marketing, things of that stature. So even if they do have an initial stigma against me, I help them get over it really quickly by showing up differently than what they expect. And I think that's the key. If you show up really caring about what matters to that person, what they want their legacy to be in the organization that they serve, what the biggest challenges are that they're having. And then to Jake's earlier point, being that consummate storyteller. When I started out with social selling, nobody believed in my process because I didn't have the results to back it up. Now I've generated over $1 billion with it that never would have existed without LinkedIn. So when I'm talking to a room of salespeople, I have instant credibility. But when I meet with a customer, they don't care about any of that stuff. What they care about is how can I relatively quickly jump in and have an impact on what they're doing? What is posing a challenge to them? Where could they gain and enhance more influence? And so I seek very quickly to find that path, and it's worked so far. But that's a great question.
Yeah, you disarm pretty fast, right? It may exist for a microsecond, but disarm quickly. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, great session again. Thank you for all the great comments out there. Lisa, thank you for the kind words, and Bob, as always, and LinkedIn user. I don't know who that is, and there were a couple other really good comments here. So thank you, and Carson, until next week.
Yeah, Jake, thank you. Audience, thank you, and until next time.
All right, guys.
Happy selling.
Thanks, everyone.
Do it. Thank you.